Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Elwood. I am the founder of Saving Lives Together, promoting general wellness, and my specialty, mental health. Today, we have special guest Lori here with us. Hi, Lori. How are you?
Great, Erica. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad you could be here.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So are you ready to dive in?
I am ready. Let's dive.
Let's do it.
There's water in the pool, right? Let's go.
I love this. Well, Lori, first of all, tell us who you are, what you're about, a little bit of background.
Sure. So Lori Kammerer, and who you and I both know together with through NABO, but I'll go through that. So anyway, I'm the president of Kammerer and Company, which is a full-service lobbying firm. We do public affairs. And I founded the firm in 2002. And prior to that, I was an executive director for an association that did a lot of workers' compensation legislation on behalf of businesses. So I've always worked for the business community. I've worked well with labor, and I founded my company after 15 years being with the other association, that I founded my company deciding that I wanted to, do legislative advocacy full time.
I love that.
And I'm also on the board of NABO, National Association of Women Business Owners, Yay! Sacramento Valley chapter, and I advocate for the state chapter, and that's how I met you.
Yes. I love that. Give us a little bit more background. So where did you grow up, and how did you get into your career?
That's a good question. Some of that I may not be able to answer. No, I'm kidding. So I grew up in Millbrae, the peninsula, just south of, probably 30 minutes south of San Francisco, but I was born and raised in San Francisco, and moved to Millbrae when I was 9 years old. And then from there, lived with my brother and sister and my mom and dad, and my dad was a teacher, and he and my mom was a professional homemaker. And in those days, that was really, raising 3 kids and getting us to, ice skating or dancing lessons or whatever she had planned for us. Anyway, so then, so I graduated and from high school, and from there I went to Pepperdine University down in Southern California, Los Angeles, Malibu area, and graduated with a degree in communications and a minor in journalism. And so you wonder, well, how did you get involved in the politics and the lobbying? Because there aren't any classes in college, at least at that time in the 80s. There wasn't any, public policy, legislative advocacy classes. So I ended up going to work for one of the presidential campaigns, the First Lady, and I guess I have to disclose who that is, because anybody thinking, okay, she graduated in the 80s, it had to be a Reagan thing. So anyway, so I did advance as an intern, for First Lady Nancy Reagan, and was in her press office. And it wasn't really politics. I mean, I was not a political person. I didn't take any poli-sci in college or anything. And so, but I was so excited about writing speeches and working with the Secret Service folks, and unpaid, right? And so, and I thought my parents were going to get mad at me. It's like, I'm doing an internship. Great. How much is it? It's nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. And so it's not going to cost anything. Or they're not paying me. So anyway, so I did that for my junior and senior year, and then I was kind of excited about, working, doing the internship and working with the First Lady at that time. And so the president was reelected. I went back to Washington, D.C. to do an internship and actually to eventually get hired by the First Lady. However, there was a hiring freeze as soon as I moved back. And I know, hiring freeze, right? It freezes. I borrowed money from my parents to be able to fly back there. And then I remember it was those days when all I had was, all of my possessions was in one box.
Wow.
All of them were in one, of those travel boxes.
Yeah.
And trying to think of what they're called. They're the, where you're hanging things in their coat box or whatever. That was all I had that I brought back with me.
Minimalist,
right?
huh?
Yes, very minimalist, I'm telling you, especially when it was going to cost money to have it shipped back there, and I didn't have, I was a poor starving kid, starving student. So anyway, so I went back there, didn't get the internships. It wasn't hired on because it was like 2 years before they were going to be bringing on, both staff for the president and for the First Lady. But I had a great time and came back out here and ended up in Sacramento. I did some campaigns, and landed a job doing this association work, and then was promoted to the executive director. And then after, like I said, 15 years,
There you are, your own company.
Exactly. and one son. I had I have a wonderful son that was with me, throughout the travel I had to do, and I brought him with me to conferences and everything. So anyway, that was my life.
That is
all
my
of it
life.
in
a nutshell. If that's a nutshell. What would you consider a challenging skill for a lobbyist or within government work?
A challenging skill.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say, and for anybody who's listening, who's in the government affairs, the hardest part of being a legislative advocate, government affairs, is to get an author for your bill. That is the hardest thing to do, because you usually have a client or several clients, supporting an issue. Like when we worked on the licensed clinical social worker bill, to fill up that shortness of psychologists, psychiatrists, and mental health care providers. But it was getting an author, and trying to find. You have 120 legislators, right? 80 in the Assembly and 40 in the Senate. And so that sounds like a lot, but you've also got a lobby corps of 3,000 people and probably 5,000, and don't even quote me on that, but it's 5,000 associations, and everybody wants to do a bill. So it's a crowded field. So that's I would say would be the biggest hurdle.
Wow. Okay.
Getting
not writing the speeches or anything like that.
No, once
just the offer.
Just you got to get the member, right? And so in our case, when we did the licensed clinical social worker bill last year, that was Senator Portantino, Anthony Portantino out of Glendale, and he has a large presence in the entertainment industry, and so, which doesn't have anything to do with the bill we were doing, but he chairs the Appropriations Committee, which is the fiscal committee that determines, like today I was telling you about the bill that I was doing now for another few clients, and that bill was held.
Yeah.
And so, but he's the chair of the Senate Appropriations, so it's his decision and others to decide which bills to hold. So I knew we were in good shape. I should have gone to the chair of appropriations in the Assembly side to do the bill that I lost today.
We're going to kind of go into that. Let me back up here.
No, I'm kidding.
No.
I'm kidding.
I want to back up really quick. What are 3 most prominent achievements as a lobbyist?
The 3 most prominent achievements?
Yeah.
Getting a bill author.
Okay.
Getting over to the second house.
Okay.
Which would be if an assembly bill, you're moving to the Senate, signed by the governor. Finally.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
Get that signature from the governor. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Where did you display the ability to influence others in past experiences? Like what influenced you to get to where you are today to want to influence others to do exactly this?
That's a really great question.
Like what influenced you to want to influence others?
Yes, thank you. And that's why I'm going to be very careful talking with my hands that I don't bump anything. That's going to take me back a little bit to the 80s when I first started as a legislative advocate. And, in those days, there were not very many women roaming the hallways, cutting deals with the legislators. It was all men. Wow. And the particular industry that I was involved with in the workers' compensation space was all men, and it was all the insurance industry. So and I'm short. And so I would be following the men, with my kind of like my clipboard and taking notes and my files and everything else. And you just kind of went in there feeling like, you were somebody's secretary, but you were trying to be working with them. And, the guys would be able to, cut deals in the men's room, or, we didn't have a lot of women legislators. Yeah. So, but it was a challenge. And that's what I really enjoyed was for a lot of the legislators, they were happy to see a woman, and the younger guy legislators were happy to see mixed company and having people coming in and working. So, and then moving forward from the 80s then into the 90s, you started to see a few more women. That I don't think that that the Me Too movement really changed too much in the legislature, but because I saw women already coming into being interested in how to get, into the legislature. I also mentored high school and law school, and even younger. I think I took a couple of field trips. My son took a couple of field trips and brought the kids with me, and I took them around just to show them, how sausage is made. No, I'm kidding. how bills, all the things, people think that you just say, okay, let's do a bill, right?
Right. They don't know everything that goes into it.
It is, there's, I did a PowerPoint presentation. I do that a lot. That basically is lobbying 101, right? And how does a bill become a law? And there is a chart that shows on the governor's website that shows how, and I think it's the Assembly and the Senate have the same thing, but it shows how a bill becomes a law, and it is an legal sized piece of paper that starts the idea, the group, and it goes all the way around to all the different steps. Wow. And so it's not like let's do a bill and get it out there and get it to committee. There's a lot of work involved.
Wow.
Woo! But it's fun and I love it, and it's great.
Yeah, 15 years.
Bringing people together, yeah.
I love that. What are some ways that you check in with yourself in mental state? So we just talked about how there's a bill that failed today.
5 minutes before we went on.
5 minutes before our filming. You guys are seeing this.
That's right. Emotions in check, right? No tissue boxes here.
We're not going to display what happens off the camera, but because of this bill being at a hold, what are some ways you're going to check in with yourself and your mental state right now?
Yes.
Obviously, you have to get back to your clients, and that's one part. But how do you check in with yourself? Not to bring that home and to work through it, but also still be present.
Right. Well, you can ask my husband because he'll tell you she brings it home. She brings everything home. She wakes up with it first thing in the morning talking about. That's what my husband would say. But there is such a strategy behind legislation.
Yeah.
You compare to the bill that we did last year, Senate Bill 102, on the adding licensed clinical social workers, into the work comp system.
Yes.
To address the shortage of psychologists and psychiatrists. That was a feel-good bill.
Right.
And I, you always have to go out and make sure you're not going to have any opposition and reach out to those who could potentially oppose. First group that I went out to was labor. The labor groups that negotiate the workers' compensation changes, went to them and I said, are you okay with this bill? Because if they're not, then we're sunk.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do a bill that is not going to benefit injured workers.
Right.
This bill obviously benefits, and especially post-pandemic, and even during the pandemic, when the bill was signed, you had first responders and our fire personnel who really needed to get that, cognitive behavioral therapy and that mental health support.
Yes.
And that was so important. And, in talking to fire chiefs and unit commanders and everything, they were saying, our guys are so close, and gals, our guys and gals are so close that they don't, if they're having a hard time compartmentalizing something, a tragedy, or just feeling okay, it's really hard for them to be able to tell their commandos and their friends, right, that they need to have help. And so,
even their spouses sometimes a stranger is better to talk to than talking to anybody that you know.
Exactly, your family.
Yeah.
So what we did in that bill was, bring the LCSWs right in line with the psychologists and the psychiatrists, because we had cases where first responders were waiting weeks to get in to see someone, and that doesn't help you because you're having to live with pain or with how to sort things out every day, and it doesn't help you heal quicker either.
And 123 people a day take their life, and so that kind of waiting is somebody's life on the line.
That's right. That's right. It was very urgent. And the LCSW can come in there and triage and make an evaluation and go within the scope of their licensure to make that recommendation, to the psychologist, who would then move them up to the psychiatrist.
Right. Or even getting to a program with people that are dealing with the same thing. And
exactly. That's exactly right. So that bill was fabulous. And then, so now how do you deal? And it was a feel-good bill. And I still tell people that of all the bills I've done in my career, that was my favorite.
Yeah.
And then my second favorite was the one that we did for NABO, which was adding women to adding a seat for women, to the, as directors of the publicly held corporations, adding a seat for them to be at the table.
Yes.
I love that bill. And then, so then how do you deal with the defeat? And the thing is, we do this so that we start out, again, on the bill that I lost today, although nothing's lost, right? Session is out September 14th. So we have other plays. We have other
things
ways
to go off on.
Yes. Yeah. We could amend.
But just today, it's one of those.
It's kind of like,
how did we didn't get it the first time, even though there are other plays, now we got to dig deeper into that.
I know.
And so how is that? How are you doing? Let's talk about that.
I know. How are you really doing? How are you really feeling? So again, no tissues, no nothing. But how am I really feeling? Well, this is the toughest day, right? We were talking about, what are some of the toughest things with lobbying? It's like, getting that author and getting it out of the first house. Well, getting it out of appropriations, we didn't even get it to the assembly floor. But, so in doing this bill, we did the same thing. We met with labor, got the labor representatives thinking it was a great bill. That we worked with the attorneys, we worked with the insurance companies, we worked with other employers and the medical provider networks. We work with them because that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're not blindsided by opposition. Well, we were able to get out of the Assembly Insurance Committee, which was the first policy committee, 14 zip. We had all caucuses. Everybody was on board with us, despite getting opposition the night before and the morning of the hearing. They had registered opposition and didn't even, the fact they registered opposition, but they weren't even referring to parts of the bill. They weren't even, provisions is what I meant to say. They weren't referring to provisions in the bill. So we were kind of thinking, are they talking about our bill or are they confused, right? Anyway, so then we had to work a little bit harder and a little bit smarter and to make sure that we reached out, to the department that was going to be, working on this bill. Appropriations committee, both in the Assembly and Senate, are mystery houses. It's first, how much is the bill going to cost the state to implement?
Right.
Our bill was not going to cost very much because the program that we were changing is already being paid for by a special assessment on employers, right, as part of their workers' compensation policies. So we thought, okay, well, so it's not going to, the dollar value is not going to hold us back because that's the fiscal committee, right? If it's going to cost the state over $50,000 to implement the bill, which most bills do cost over 50, whether you're hiring positions or creating a new department or whatever, it's at least 50,000. Well, we came in, at a couple $100,000, but not new costs. So I thought, well, that's not going to be the reason to stop.
Right.
I think that the reason why the bill was held was that we had last minute opposition that, it kind of piled on. Piled on. And I'll sit on my hands so I don't talk. So I think last minute opposition. So how do I handle that?
How are you? What are you going to do?
Get to the point,
once. Because I'm glad you actually mentioned that because I think that I think we all self-talk and have to process what just happened. How did we get here? What's our following next steps? Right. Just to even be able to process okay, this is how I'm feeling, right? Internally. I think it is a process all the way. So I'm glad you're doing it.
It is. And the thing is, if you didn't have your wins, you are celebrating your wins, right? You're not gonna get every single bill, right? There isn't any lobbyist.
If you did get every single win, you said you got into this because you love the challenge. Well, then it wouldn't be much of a challenge if you just got every one.
Exactly. But I have to say I'm very careful, right? Everything is methodical because I don't want to set myself or my clients up for failure, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We go in to win.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Go in to win. but sometimes there are things that are just not in your control.
Right.
You may have the best bill, and this is the best bill. And
Yeah.
I think that there were a lot of folks that just don't like the medical provider networks
Yes.
and in the work comp system. And the whole reason why these were formed was to model the group health side.
Right.
Right. So just like you and I go to our doctors when we don't feel well, or if we trip or fall at home, we go and we see doctors. When you're injured on the job, the MPNs, medical provider networks, were modeled the same way so that you
Right.
could have a whole group of doctors to pick from,
Right.
and not have to litigate every claim or worry about getting your paycheck and everything else, right?
Right.
It's a constitutional right to have those benefits given to you. So, going back and that's why it's very disappointing. I mean, that's
Yes.
check that box. Very disappointing. We worked the bill. I can't think. I mean, you could always think of, I could have done this and I could have done this better,
Right.
or I could have reached out to so and so or whatever. We reached out to everybody,
Right.
And those who reached out to us with concerns, we scheduled Zooms or met with them right away. And once we talked to them to tell them what we're trying to do with the legislation, they were okay with it.
Yes.
It's the last minute opposition that
Right.
came in that really doesn't understand the bill, that made the chair feel, you know what, I think this bill isn't baked yet.
Right.
So why don't we hold it here and then let them figure out what they're going to do. I was kind of surprised because I thought we would have been able to get out of the first house. We had a great author, Freddie Rodriguez, who's very popular, and he's just a great guy. But even Freddie couldn't get the bill out of there.
Right.
And so, so how do I feel? Yes, disappointed. Are we, throwing in the towel? No way. We have, other
Just
options.
hit the ground running even
We
more.
we are. We'll do a debrief, with the clients. I have
Yes.
like 4 clients on this bill. And so we'll do a debrief and we'll figure out next steps. If we have to amend into another bill, that's going to be very challenging. Not going to make any promises, but we're going to do our darnest to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my second inkling is I'm going to go to the department that would be administering the bill and say, okay, they didn't want to do it legislatively, so let's go ahead and put it. Let's go through regulation, or let's sit down and make the changes now that we were looking for in the bill.
Right.
So, and there's other options, but we're just not going to throw the towel in. It's just disappointing that it didn't get out of. It was held in
First
the committee.
stage, yeah.
Yeah, first stage. That was.
So how would you say you almost shake it off? Like, obviously you know what you're going to do business wise, but now what are you going to do for like your sake and for your overall being?
That's a great question. So
Yoga, ice
yoga,
cream.
yeah, ice cream, wine, cheese. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you can never go wrong there.
Go swimming. What am I going to do? So I think, I don't internalize things.
Yes.
It's like, okay, that's a no. We lost the bill, so now we're going to move on. We're going to figure out how we can resurrect it and how
Yes.
we can bring it back.
Right.
For me, for my mental health, I think I've been doing this for a long time. So, I know honestly, and people can be really hard on themselves too, right?
Right.
You can be your own worst critic,
Right.
right? And so, and I do, I am, I want to make sure that I'm exercising, which I haven't been to the gym in a month because it's been too busy, and it's been conferencing and traveling, and it's hard to get to the
It's
gym.
been busy.
Then that was fine. I got over that. I thought, you know what, Lori, it's okay to take a break.
Yes.
And it's okay not to kill yourself at the gym twice a week when it means you can get an extra hour of sleep
Right.
and be on your game.
Right.
And so, my husband's going, oh, you got to be exercising, and you've got to be out there because you're going to just perform so much better. And I said, are you kidding? I'm going to get that extra hour of sleep.
Yeah.
And I'm
You're
going
like,
to
that's going to perform.
and yes, and that's going to provide, my brain going forward. So anyway, but yeah, so the, how am I going to, it's basically just moving on. We're going to
Yeah.
move on. Here's the news. We can't dwell on it because that's not going to get us anywhere.
Right.
And so that's what we do. And so we just focus on, the next steps and just, go from there. And so I'm good with that. I'm fine. Because if we didn't do everything that we could do to get this bill forward. Like I said at the beginning, that
then you dwell on what else could we do.
Yeah.
But you know that you did everything.
We did everything. And some, and I did. I went through that thing about who, what could I have done differently and everything else. And you come to that realization, you did everything.
Right.
And so by doing that, it's not like I left anything out. So I'm good with that. I'm okay with that.
Right. I love that.
And so we move on to the next.
For our viewers watching, what would you say, someone stepping into the realm of government or working for the state or even stepping in a lobbyist and just kind of getting their feet wet in this realm, what would you say should be a priority for just their overall wellness?
The priority.
Because you have 15 years, and so think about when you didn't have 15 years, like you had your son that traveled with you, but people that are taking this home and are letting it affect their families, like what would you say to those viewers or those people, or if any words of encouragement, or just do this?
Yeah, or just do this. So I would say words of encouragement. I think, when you're first starting out as a legislative advocate, you're, kind of figuring out how to navigate, because like I said, I think Sacramento State has now offered a lobbying course, and I know that there are some, and there are some that are online, courses, how to lobby. Well, yeah, you can tell people how to lobby, and you can, but it's really, you don't retain a lobbyist for what they know, right? You don't hire somebody who's an expert in workers' comp, because I'm certainly not. I've never managed to claim. You hire a lobbyist because of the influence they have, because of the members they know, because of their knowledge of the process.
Right.
And so that would be the way that you would retain, or why you would keep a lobbyist. Just starting out, find a shadow, find a mentor. And I don't even like to use the word shadow, because you don't want a shadow. You want to be right there, just arm in arm with whoever it is who's mentoring you or working with you.
Right.
And, and there's a certain element that, you want to position your bill, you want to get the support behind you. And, there's steps along the way. And how do you find the best author, right? Well, what committee is that bill going to go through? Yeah. Try to find the one of the members of that committee, because they'll likely be able to get the bill passed out of their committee because they're a member of that committee,
right?
And so, but yeah, I would say for anyone who's getting into advocacy, interested in advocacy, that I know that I think there's several universities. Sac State, for one, is what I know because they're local. They have fellowship programs and internship programs, and that's a great way to be coming in to the building and I say building, the Capitol, and understanding, what goes on from the inside. What's the role of the lobbyist? And it's funny because the majority of the folks that I knew that were, quite a bit younger than I am when they started, they're now lobbying too. And they spent maybe 5 or 6 years or however many years in the building to really understand. And when they were interested in leaving, they would go and work for a lobbying firm, who they were familiar with, coming into the building and lobbying a bill.
I love that. Do you have anything you would like to share, just overall, all together? I feel like we can learn so much from you.
Oh no, because I'm just thinking, I think we were going to frame, about mental health and taking care of yourself in your career, and NABO is very big on mental health and wellness and well-being. And May is Mental Health Month.
I know.
And so I know. I saw that's why I thought we have got to get together in May, because that's so important. And it's also Women Business Owners Month, I believe, right?
Yes.
And so I thought we did that in March, but I'm thinking, hey, if we did it in March, let's do it in May and June and July and August.
Going.
Let's just every month. It's going to be, a Women's Business Month.
Yeah.
And so, but this is an important month, the mental health. And I know that, sometimes when we're on the Zooms, it would be nice when we can get back in person but although a lot of people really like Zoom because it saves the travel time.
Yes.
And I like
just
it.
convenient for everyone, I feel like.
So
we're all coming from different areas and different places, on the road half the time.
Yeah, and very convenient, because if I need to meet with a bunch of members in a short amount of time, it's a lot faster to have everybody in line in a Zoom, right? 3 o'clock, 3:15, 3:30, rather than running from the 4th floor to the 6th floor to the 7th floor.
Sacramento to Rockland.
Yes. Yeah. And exactly. Meanwhile, my bill is on its way out the door, and they hadn't called it yet. They were on the P's, and my author's name starts with an R. So I thought, and then that when I was listening to it on my phone before we were going to get started, they were the timing was off. And then I started getting texts. The bill was held. The bill was held. It was like, wait a minute, they're only on Q. We're not at P yet, or R. We're not at R yet. But anyway,
you guys are seeing this like realistic. This is a bill that we're talking about today.
Live that just died.
It just died, but it's going to get resurrected.
It is, exactly. Well, they think it died, right? It was held. So now I've got to take that same idea and put it in another vehicle.
I can't wait till we come back and when the bill's gone through, and then we can talk about exactly what it was like and pinpoint the before and the after of it all, right?
What did you do? I know. I can't wait to tell you what we did. And probably the best time, we'll know by September 14th, right? Because that's when, session is over.
Yeah.
And so, but you can still amend a bill all the way up until the 14th. The thing is that the members don't like to do last minute, bills. But
understandable.
And it's
that doesn't mean it hasn't been done.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And if we have to go through, the Division of Workers' Compensation to, get these changes made, if we have to go through a budget bill, there's all kinds of, I'm kind of giving away the secrets and everything, the nitty gritty. It's like, well, we couldn't get off appropriations, but we can go through, a budget bill. And that may be what we do. Right. And, because there's this bill was not going to, run into a big cost to the state of California.
Right.
But so so we were talking about, people coming in next gen, lobbyists and stuff, and coming in, work with a mentor, spend time, with the members in the offices, talk to the staff.
It's all about community and communication.
Absolutely.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we do that well at NABO.
Yes, we
do. Communities are number one.
That's exactly right. Inclusivity.
And then just even in our own businesses, I feel like we're all on the same page of communicating to who we need to communicate to, and then just bringing that to the table, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This has been a really fun and enlightening, and just kind of, I love doing it. All I got to do was talk about myself.
And we love hearing about you.
No, that was fun. Something I don't do very often. So, but I really appreciate you inviting me.
Of course, absolutely. First of all, I want to say thank you to our viewers. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for following. If you have not yet, go ahead and like, follow, and share. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everything. We're everywhere. So like, follow, and get to know Lori. Bye.